Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I am Pastor Mark Baze, and thank you for joining us. Once again, I really do appreciate it. Now, we did not have any live streams yesterday. It's just because we are covered in ice. And by ice, I mean literal ice. We did not get really any snow at all. We got entirely sleet. And so it was just really, really dangerous to have people getting out. Right now, it is currently 14 degrees here. Thankfully, Starlink's pretty amazing. We've got good, strong internet. But we didn't have service for, I think, the right reasons. And so now, here we are. I'm doing the live stream. I'll probably be doing the live stream tomorrow as well. And so excited, at least getting 4 live streams of Shields and Arrows this week. We will be back by Wednesday. Surely we'll be back for Abraham. And then I won't be going live this weekend either. I'll be gone doing some other things. But we will continue marching onward. Now, I will say this has been a very interesting week, reflecting on where we are as a country. For a long time, there's been a lot of strife. There's been a lot of conflict between political parties and even infighting amongst conservatives. And that's kind of been an ongoing trend. Yes, there has been infighting within the Democrat Party to some degree, but not near somewhat libertarians. Hopefully we didn't lose you there. I saw a little bit of a flash, but hopefully we're in good shape. I think I'm still with you here. And so with that, one of the things that has me a little bit, I don't know if I want to use the term nervous or really has my attention. We have been wondering when, if there is going to be a big event that creates a serious divide. And there have been things that have happened in the past, whether it's BLM or the insurrection, as they like to call it, January 6th, the time in which the Capitol Police opened up the doors and let the horn hat guy in. That you wondered, hey, is this a big moment in the United States? Is this a moment when we're really going to see a serious division? And you don't even want to utter the words, but the words were used, right? A civil war. One of the things that makes me nervous about what's going on between the federal government and Minnesota and all of the controversy that's going on, there does seem to be a lack of people using civil war in the headlines, at least from what I've seen. Now, maybe people that you follow, maybe they're mentioning it. I'm not saying we're there, but I'm saying I feel like we're as close now as we've been since the 1800s, because there does seem to be some very motivated individuals, maybe you could even say groups, who are feeling that they are justified in intervening in the operations of the federal government, and they are willing potentially to use force. There are some interesting videos that are being played right now, and you just see people who are using some very strong language. And one of the things is we've seen rhetoric from politicians before, those in government before. The language that you see coming out of Minnesota, like Governor Tim Walz, it doesn't seem to be in any way attributing to a de-escalation. So I don't know. These things start out really slow, the build to conflict, and then they happen fast. I don't know if we're at that point where things are about to start happening fast. Who knows, what may happen today or tomorrow. A group of, even what if it's just 3 or 4, half a dozen armed individuals really do come out in force against ICE agents? What does that mean? How does that look? peace is something that's not easy to gain and can be lost quickly. So I'm going to get into the more minutia of the matter concerning this recent ICE shooting, but I just want to start off the show with taking a bigger picture look, because I don't know entirely what to expect. I don't know what's going to happen here. And if we can't enforce federal law in these states because they won't allow it, there's too much resistance within, and if federal law can't be enforced in a proper way, and I'm maybe going to take a step back and consider some of my thoughts on how ICE is conducting some of this. Is there a better way forward? Should they be wearing masks, or do we need to remove masked agents entirely? But if there's not a way forward for federal law to be enforced, how much longer can we really persist as a United States of America? How long can we really operate that way? Because Minnesota doesn't want to be Oklahoma, and Oklahoma doesn't want to be Minnesota. Now, I say that, it's a shame, because I know there are people from those northern states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, so on, who are conservative people. But your government's not there, and your cities are not there. They are not wanting to adopt conservative values. It's a continuing theme for me, but at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I just keep thinking that it seems like this massive federal government is just not going to be able to sustain itself, and that the only way forward is power given back to the states to let each state govern itself as it sees fit, and a great reduction in the authority of the federal government. Now, there's a lot of concern what that may mean, what that may mean for the world stage, right? Can the world continue in peace if there's not, the American federal government policing other countries? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is. Maybe we do need massive empires. That was a conversation we had last week. I certainly would like to try. I would like to try and see what a smaller federal government looks like. So with that in mind, that's kind of everything that's hanging over our heads right now. And here's the thing. I hope that it's absolutely nothing. And for all intents and purposes, you just kind of need to go about your business. You need to live your life. You need to meet the normal provisions you would otherwise, right? Make sure you got food in the pantry. Make sure that you've got, some gas in a tank, probably in the garage or somewhere. I don't know what's the technical way you're supposed to store gasoline in a jug, whatever. Silver and gold. Gold and silver right now are at a very high value compared to what they were. So I would say be diligent, be smart. We, unfortunately, as nice as it would be to have that evangelical mentality that God is in control of everything and it's all going to just work out exactly the way God wants, you and I know that God is not operating in the way he did with, the Chaldeans or the Medo-Persians or the Greeks or Israel or Egypt. The program God has in place is not a national program. It's not establishing a kingdom for Israel, which extends to the rest of the world, blessing all people. God is blessing all people through the individual gospel, salvation by grace through faith, which means that you and I are going to have to do the best we can with the time we have to set up sound governance. So that's the big picture view. Let's talk about the event that unfolded in Minnesota. I know that the second shooting that took place in Minnesota between ICE and, I'm not going to say protesters, I'm going to say rioters, agitators, if you will, has happened. And it's all over the news. I know that you have seen it. I'll go ahead and pull up a post for you just so you can look at it. So here's from the Daily Wire: armed protester killed, Dems threaten shutdown, and Trump sends warships to Middle East. So a lot going on right now, and I do want to focus on this shooting of a man, 37 years old, Alex Preddy. He was involved with Border Patrol, as many of you know. They were seeking to arrest a man who is here illegally, a violent criminal history, when Petty, according to the video, once again, all this is being investigated, so we're going to see how all that plays out. He inserts himself, right? And brings himself into this altercation going on between Border Patrol and another agitator. And with that, conflict ensues. They attempt to move him, to get him out of the way, to get him to remove himself from the situation. Leads to physical conflict. He goes down to the ground. You hear gun, and the Border Patrol then shoots him. As he is showing resistance, it's not that he was being compliant. He was showing resistance. Now, the challenge is there's several different video angles. It looks like it is absolutely possible that he was disarmed before being shot. Now, how that happened, it appears that an agent got a pistol that was on Preddy, however you pronounce his last name, and he removes the gun. There is potentially a gun that goes off, and it may have been a negligent, and this is all speculation at this point. Go watch the videos yourselves if you would like. Certainly it's disturbing, but there's some footage you can find that doesn't show all the details, just the initial part. But it's possible that there was a negligent discharge of the pistol from one of the Border Patrol agents. And meanwhile, all of this, there are protesters surrounding the agents, surrounding Preddy and everything else. And they're blowing whistles, they're making noise. It's a high-stress situation or something. So, there's a lot happening. There is a lot happening. Preddy is shot, he's killed, he's shot multiple times. And this has led to massive protests and massive conflict. I mean, this is a national story. Second person involved in ICE protests, borderline riots, or maybe they are riots, depending on how you define it, that has been killed by Border Patrol. Obviously, a really bad look for Border Patrol. It's not something you want to see. We don't want to see anybody losing their life in that way. So the left is coming out and saying this is a clear example of ICE being evil, just executing people in the streets, right? They're going to run with that. And on the other hand, the DHS, the Trump administration, their position is this man has come presenting a threat. The Border Patrol agents responded properly, and the man had malintent. And so they are justified. That's the case that is being made by the Trump administration. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, and you can look up the statements themselves. Now, there's a number of people who are coming out, some who I guess would maybe call themselves conservative or Republican, but more on the moderate side, who are being very critical of ICE and, hey, you can't support ICE if you're a Christian because of what they're doing, being involved in the murdering of people and so on. Okay. Tensions are high, emotions are high. I'm going to make a few points about this, and hopefully this will give you some thoughts to consider, maybe in how you approach the conversation, the discussion surrounding what has unfolded, okay? I've got several different points that I want to make here. I'm not speaking as an expert on this, just trying to consider this reasonably. I've got experience and knowledge to some degree with firearms, and I also have some experience and knowledge to law enforcement just because I have law enforcement in my family. I have trained alongside law enforcement in courses involving firearms. So I'm just going to share with you some thoughts on this. Also, just from a theological perspective, okay? And someone who wants to see federal laws that are protecting American citizens enforced. So point number one, in the case of every shooting, this is true whether it involves ICE or if it involves some other group, right? Maybe it's not even one group is government officers, government officials. It's just anybody. Every case, an investigation needs to take place, a thorough investigation, getting all the details. And then, once the investigation is carried out, there should be justice served. Now, justice is not... That is not to say that somebody must go to prison. Justice is seeing that what is right is done. So if somebody is justified in a shooting, for example, if these officers were justified, after the investigation, then every single one of those officers should be able to live their lives. If they want to continue working in the agency, they can do that. Perhaps commended for their actions. Now, for somebody who wants to get mad at me and say they're not justified at all, if they're not justified, then they should receive the proper punishment, depending on if that's being fired or time in prison. I have no problem with justice being served, but justice is not just putting somebody in jail. It is seeing that what is right is carried out. So, if they have done something unjust, if they are not justified in their conduct, then let the investigation be done and the punishment be administered that is equating to the crime done. Now, I will say, in light of all that was going on, and here's the thing these protesters need to realize, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well, because there seems to be, one of the things you'll notice, if you're going to pick where an incident goes down in the country, it seems to be Minneapolis. Minneapolis is kind of a mess for when it comes to, when it comes to incidents, right? National incidents. Where is local law enforcement ensuring that protesters are not able to interfere? You can protest all you want, that's fine, but interfering is where you're crossing a line. Where's the local law enforcement? There's not any. I'm just telling you right now, it's going to make people really mad if you are somebody who believes that these officers were not justified. When you are on the streets, when you are in action, and I'm speaking as somebody looking from the outside in, I haven't been there and done it, you're already on high alert because you have a target on you, because you're wearing the uniform. And if there's somebody who is opposing you, maybe it's the person that you are seeking to arrest, what have you, you have a target on your back. You combine that with a massive number of people who are shouting at you, screaming at you, blowing whistles at you, and you are just a person. I know that there's this desire to vilify everyone and make everyone out to be a non-human, but you're just a person, and your hope is, hey, I really hope that I can make it through this deal so I can go home and see my family. That's kind of your motivation there, right? I want to survive so I can go home and see my family. And you feel threatened. It's a very challenging thing. These things happen very, very quickly. They happen very, very fast. And anybody who's been in a car wreck, for example, you know how quickly it can take place before you even perceive what is actually going on around you. So let justice be done. Let the investigation be carried out. But I will say that there's going to be some challenges to just throw in the book at these officers because of the fact that Tim Walz and the local governments in Minneapolis has not done anything to have law enforcement on the scene to help with the situation. Now that if they're tried in Minneapolis, which I don't know, it's going to be a federal issue because they're federal governments. I would imagine. The police officers involved in George Floyd were subjected to the same situation, right? Protesters yelling, screaming at them. They're worried about the protesters. To a degree, the protesters themselves are stoking the flames and creating violent and dangerous situations by escalating everything so much more. So that's point number one. Let justice be done. Let the investigation be carried out thoroughly. Point number two. Whether or not this man was justified in being shot. Anytime you interfere with law enforcement, and the Border Patrol is a law enforcement agency, they're enforcing federal law concerning immigration, the border. So ICE officials. When you interfere with law enforcement, it's a serious act. It's an illegal thing to interfere with law enforcement. So you're already breaking the law. And you're putting yourself at great risk for interfering, confronting law enforcement when they're carrying out their work. And there are serious ramifications that will come with that, like you being charged. But also, interference and opposition will almost certainly be taken as a threat because they don't know your intentions. You're already breaking a crime. You're already breaking the law by interfering with law enforcement. So what other crimes may you be willing to break? They don't know. They don't know who you are. So creating altercations with law enforcement is just a very, very bad idea. The reality is Renee Good and it's Alex Preddy, I believe is his name, Alex Preddy. If neither one of them would have been interfering with law enforcement, and it's really hard. You have to try really, really hard. You have to try really, really hard to get yourself in conflict with law enforcement. You have to be non-compliant. You have to be inserting yourself into a situation. That doesn't happen on accident. You don't accidentally interfere with law enforcement. Renee Good was not stuck in the middle of the road trying to make a U-turn. She was intentionally blocking the road. Alex Preddy, by all available evidence, was intentionally getting involved in a conflict with ICE. And furthermore, let me say this, in addition to point number two, interfering with law enforcement while being in possession of a firearm or any object that can be perceived as a weapon escalates the situation that much more. Because you're already giving yourself the appearance of a threat by interfering because you're already breaking the law. But then if you have an object that is perceived as a threat, whether that is a firearm or it is a hammer or a knife or anything, you have escalated the situation exponentially. That's exactly what he did. Now, that doesn't mean that he intended to use the firearm, but you just have to realize how serious the situation is. I've talked about this before on my show. I exercise my Second Amendment right. I carry a firearm everywhere I go. Everywhere I go. And what that means is I'm not going to get into a senseless altercation. It does me no good. It accomplishes nothing for me to get in a fist fight with someone. It accomplishes nothing, right? There are a very small number of scenarios, I'm not saying it's impossible, but a very small number of scenarios where I get into a physical fight. If there is a reason for me to carry out force on someone, the vast majority of scenarios where I'm going to be carrying out force will be lethal. Because if I get in a fight, even if it's just a, hey buddy, you knocked into me and spilled my beer, not me, but I got knocked into him and he spilled his beer. If we're in a fight and then for some reason my gun happens to fall out, once again, you have just exponentially escalated a situation. So you have to think about that. The simple fact is, he brought so much of this upon himself. He did. I'm not saying he was justified in being shot. Let the investigation be carried out. Those two things can both be true. That it was not justified in shooting him. Once again, let the investigation play out. We'll see. I want to see the facts. I'm a right divider. Okay? We try not to just draw conclusions and assume. We let the Word of God, answer the questions for us. We just investigate. Let's investigate. Let's see what the truth is. At the same time, that does not mean that he doesn't bear some responsibility for putting himself in that situation. He just does. He just does. Now, that brings us to point number 3. And this is one that makes me mad. And I'm mad at the conservatives on this one. I'm mad at the conservatives, supposedly conservatives. I've got an article from the USA Today that I want to show you here. And so from USA Today, gun rights group slam Fed's comments after Minneapolis shooting. There have been some I'm just going to say dumb things that have been said by Kristi Noem, by Kash Patel in the fallout of this event. Now, I'm sure it's because they want to cover their own necks, and maybe the information they have, they think they're justified in saying this. But first of all, here is the quote from the very top. I don't know of any peaceful protesters. I am very sorry about that. The ads here that show up on USA Today. What in the world, folks? Gun right group slam Fed's comments after Minneapolis shooting. I don't know of any peaceful protesters that show up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign, said Department of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. Now, granted, that is just a single quote. It could be potentially taken out of context. All right, it absolutely could. But what I do not like is the vilification of Alex Preddy because, once again, I believe it's Alex. If it's a different name, I apologize. I'll have to read the article again. But the vilification of this man because he had a gun on him. I think that's wrong because it's your Second Amendment right to have a gun. Now, Minneapolis, Minnesota, you are allowed to conceal carry if you have a permit. All right, you are allowed to conceal carry if you have a permit. I don't believe that he had a permit. All right, so technically him as an individual, all right, not according to the law in general, because you do have a right if you have a concealed carry permit, and I don't think those are lawful either. I think that you should just be able to carry. But he did not have a permit, which meant him carrying a firearm was not legal. But just because a person is carrying a gun, you should not instantly vilify them and then attribute to them bad motives. All right, I think that is against the Second Amendment. I do not appreciate Kristi Noem and any other politicians who will use just the fact that he was carrying a gun against him. All right, now you can say, but these are some things that we've got to really think about. All right, we need to make sure we have all the facts first. They said that he didn't have a sign. He came and he just had a gun. You can protest without a sign, and maybe, once again, he didn't know the rules. He didn't know the laws. I mean, I guess you can plead ignorance. That doesn't mean you're going to get off for it, but that doesn't mean that he had bad intentions. And he certainly did not pull his gun on ice, at least right at the beginning. And there is some good reason to think that maybe he never did pull his gun on ice. Maybe they took it from him before he ever pulled it. Just, that's why we got to have the investigation. So I don't appreciate the instant vilification of him. A few other things here. U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley, from Southern California, said if you approach law enforcement with a gun, there is a high likelihood they will be legally justified in shooting you. Don't do it. And then other members of the Trump administration argued peaceful protesters don't show up with guns. See, I do not like that. You should be able to protest and be armed. That is absolutely fine. Back when Virginia was trying to carry out gun bans, there were armed protesters. So this is a horrible move by Kristi Noem and everybody else who is trying to correlate him carrying a gun with him being somebody with bad intentions. If you approach law enforcement with a gun, well, he had it holstered for all we know. Okay? Now, if it turns out that he tried to draw on them after the initial conflict, then fine. Okay. But just this initial blanket statement of him having a gun and that instantly makes him bad. This is terrible. I mean, are the Republicans really Second Amendment, or are they just faking this whole time? Are they just trying to buy our votes? And the fact that they let us down over and over again in Congress and never passed pro-gun laws has me wondering. I do agree with Thomas Massey here. He says, carrying a firearm is not a death sentence. It's a constitutionally protected, God-given right. And if you don't understand this, you have no business in law enforcement or government. I do agree with Thomas Massey on that. That is an accurate statement. Furthermore, Kash Patel had this statement. I wanted to try to find his statement here and read it to you. So Kash Patel had this to say: no one who wants to be peaceful shows up at a protest with a firearm that is loaded with 2 full magazines. That is a very infuriating statement there, and I guess you can also rent a private jet. But a firearm that is loaded with 2 full magazines? Well, first of all, Cash, I thought you were a big Second Amendment guy. That's what you originally said. I carry a loaded firearm all the time, every day. All right? I carry a loaded firearm every day, and sometimes I have more than 1 magazine with me. Because, I don't know, maybe sometimes you need to reload. Because there's some evil people out there, and there may be more than 1. And there's no laws against carrying multiple magazines. Not in Oklahoma. I don't think there is any in Minnesota either. Now, you got to have a permit for it. So that's a very, very ignorant statement. Do not argue from the left. And that's what frustrates me, is they claim to be on the right, they claim to be conservatives, they claim to be constitutionalists, and then when they feel like it's convenient, when they can score a political win, they attack from the left. You cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have the right to break the law. Now, maybe he's speaking in the context of not having a permit, but why didn't he mention that? You think he could have mentioned you've got to have a permit if you're going to conceal carry. In Minnesota, there's other states that have constitutional carry, like Oklahoma, you don't have to have a permit. So Kash Patel went down significantly in my estimation. It's very, very infuriating. I do not appreciate that at all. So point number 3, carrying a gun does not automatically make you a threat. Very, very frustrating to me that some of those in the Republican Party, in the Trump administration, are coming out and saying ignorant things. I thought Kristi Noem was pretty good until this point. She better walk back her statements really fast. We better get a whole bunch of statements really quickly saying we misspoke, we should not have vilified somebody just for carrying a gun. Now, let me bring up point number 4. Point number 4, for all of the, how do I put this nicely, bleeding heart liberals out there, looking at a lot of the the liberal white women, because that's just kind of how it is. There's going to be a lot of them posting on social media, taking their righteous high horse position that shame on you, you're not a good Christian because you support ICE. Once again, I'm not saying I support what ICE did today. Let there be an investigation. And there is room for a serious conversation about just raids without having warrants, and maybe they did have a warrant, I imagine they did, or some capacity, you would hope they would. But maybe something more along the lines of getting rid of the raids and them identifying themselves. And we could have a conversation about whether or not they should wear masks. I know for some people this is, they would call this fascism, of just masked government officials. You don't know who they are. I understand the counter argument because liberals will take your picture and they will post all over the internet and try to ruin your life, and you can't live anywhere because somebody's going to target you. All that's legitimate as well, but maybe there's a better way forward. I want to hear propositions. I want to hear proposals. Maybe there's some better ideas about how to do this. I know I don't like no-knock raids by the ATF because many people have just been killed by the ATF due to no-knock raids. A gentleman was killed just last year, I believe, Arkansas. He was an air traffic controller, I think. And the ATF taped up his front doorbell camera and raided his house, and he was shot to death. So I hate that. I don't want to see government officials doing that against American citizens. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this either. We can all have those conversations. That's fine. But there is one thing. Once again, for all the bleeding heart liberal Christians out there, is that a contradiction? I don't know. The death of this man, and I really do mean this, is far less tragic than the death of Laken Riley. So, Laken Riley, you'll recall, young woman murdered by an illegal alien several years ago. Where were your tears then? Where were your Facebook posts then? Were you making a Facebook post for Laken Riley and talking about how there needs to be better laws about getting these criminals out of our country, off the streets? Or did that just not quite fit your political motivations there? And rather you waited to hold out until you could post something against Trump? Why is it that you cry more tears for someone like Preddy, who, once again, if the investigation proves that there was no justification, absolute tragedy, you hate it, but it was not as tragic as Laken Riley, who was just murdered. Preddy inserted himself into a situation, and if he would not have interfered, it never would have happened. All the liberal commentators are overlooking this. All of these bleeding heart liberals that are posting on Facebook are ignoring this. I would just comment and ask the question, were you this upset about Laken Riley? Were you this upset about Laken Riley? All right, I'm going to read a few comments now so you can tell me what you think about the whole situation. Do you think that I have estimated it well? Is there something I've overlooked? Is there something else that we need to consider? Paid agitators are concentrating their efforts because of political backing. I think it's entirely possible. There absolutely are paid agitators. We know this. We have seen it before. Ken says, based on the chaos and tactics that these agitators are using, ICE and Border Patrol need better training when these planned noise and interference behaviors ensue. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that regardless of how this plays out, you've got to have a plan and a strategy for a strategy for when all of these people gather around you in an effort to intimidate you, protest against you, annoy you, because it escalates the situation. Anybody here who's a parent and you are trying to do anything and you've got all your kids screaming and yelling at one time, maybe you're trying to drive in a vehicle and you're trying to figure out where your turn is and the kids are all yelling, that is stressful. That will make you be on edge. Now make it a life or death situation in which this guy may or may not have a gun and there's all this noise going on. We expect law enforcement and agents to be superhuman. What I'm saying is, quit putting them in those situations because you've got to get the protesters taken care of. So either bring in more Border Patrol agents to secure it. We don't have enough. Local law enforcement's got to be involved, which I think local law enforcement does help in other states like Texas, but Minnesota not so much. Also, get rid of practices that just create those kind of scenarios, like no-knock raids. Especially the ATF and FBI should not be allowed to do no-knock raids. I really do believe that. I think you should identify yourself, be able to give your badge number, everything like that. I do think that's probably the way forward. The only reason why ICE and Border Patrol I'm a little bit less hesitant, or I'm a little more hesitant on to draw a hard line there, is because they're supposed to be targeting non-American citizens. And as American citizens, you should have rights and privileges that others don't. But if we agree that if you believe it's a moral wrong to not identify yourself and carry out a no-knock raid, then we can have that conversation, and maybe we want to change the rules and policies. I will say, for all those who are targeting Trump and saying, oh, he's acting like a fascist or what have you, this has been going on for a long time. Previous administrations have been having agents carry out raids, masked, not identified, for a long time. Trump, once again, for everybody who wants to act like Trump is doing unprecedented things, he's not. He's just doing what has been done by previous presidents. EMT Lucky says, felt really bothered emotionally these last couple of days, doing my best to stay grounded. Focus on my immediate home and family. And I think that's what you have to do. You will wear yourself out mentally, emotionally, if you just let all the weight of the world rest upon your shoulders. You've got to be a little bit more local, right? You've got to think about your community, because we can't solve everything, which is why I wish that we could shift our politics entirely to a more local matter. Speaking of that, let's go ahead and talk about something. I want to commend a company, and that is this company right here, okay? Brahms. Why? Is it because I like their breakfast or their chocolate milkshakes and burgers? Yes, those things are all true. But Brahms is much more than a fast food chain in Oklahoma and parts of Texas, some in Arkansas, some in Missouri. It has this right here, Fresh Market. And you can... The thing about Brahms is a farm that is located in Oklahoma. And it's a big operation, but it is a farm. We have been hit by some really bad winter weather here. Roads are really slick. People have been, iced in some ways, not able to get out. I had to hop a fence the other day to get out of my house. A little bit more context there, but if you shut a door, you can't get it opened without having to go hop a fence or something. Anyways, but Brahms has ramped up production in preparation for this. They've been sending out trucks in the middle of the night to get deliveries made. It's taken them hours and hours to drive across some very icy roads to get milk and eggs and bread and bacon and just basic grocery necessities to these stores. And so all these fast food places that are Brahms, they also have a grocery store inside, and you're able to get groceries. There's other places that are more shut down. These markets that rely on getting milk and produce and just other things from other states further away, they're not as quick to restock their shelves, where Brahms is much more quickly able to do so. That right there, I think, just goes to show you the value of having locally resourced farms. Local farms where you can get produce, you can get food, you can get meat. I've got some really good friends who also have a farm. If they had milk, I would get it from them, but Brahms is the best place to go for milk in Oklahoma that I've found so far. Imagine if there were restrictions taken off of farming even more, and you could have all the more local farmers. This really is the solution. They don't have close by farms and places to get their shelves stocked soon. They're relying on these shipments coming from way out of state. I mean, you would be looking at chaos, mass death, because they can't get the shelves stocked. That is one of the big problems with this industrialized corporate type platform. Now, granted, Brahms is huge. They make a ton of money, but it is kind of an Oklahoma thing. And so Oklahoma is going to have a good supply of produce in short order when disasters come. I just think it's a good example of what we need to be operating as a people. I know that you can get on Amazon. I know that you can do that, but I'm just telling you, you need to find local industry, whether it is local lumber, whether it is local food, whether it is even just local hardware or what have you. If we can invest in that, maybe eventually we could see a day when there is more manufacturing in a local area. Imagine if Oklahoma had the means to manufacture the vast majority of the everyday basic materials that we needed, right? I know that we can make lumber. We can make paper. We can make. I don't know how much, if we can even manufacture hardly any metal in Oklahoma. I don't know how much happens here, but we do need to figure this out. We've got to have some internal state security. We talk about national security. National security only does you so much good. What happens when a real event takes place? You need the grocery stores to be stocked, and you just can't do it as quickly. Walmart's not going to do it as quickly. Sam's is not going to do it as quickly. Kroger, I don't care. Local state-run operations are so much more flexible, and they're able to meet these more immediate needs. So when reality hits, the real world comes, you get a dose of reality. I think you just see how valuable it is to have a grocery store like Brahms. I think that's the biblical view. And it makes you wonder, is it possible to even do that with immigration enforcement? Why not empower the states to do so? Because I guess what's holding Oklahoma back and other states back from doing it is because, you don't have the authority to do that, that's the federal government. Well, what if the state did have the authority to do it? What if the state did have the ability to carry out its own illegal immigration's deportation operations, right? Maybe you wouldn't have the conflict of federal agents coming in because, hey, we don't know them. We don't know who these federal agents are. What if it's more a local agent? What if it's just a local officer who is able to carry this out? I think that when you keep it local and you don't have these people from the outside coming in, maybe it'll lead to more success. Maybe it'll lead to less opposition. Maybe we'll quit being at each other's throats so much because they seem like real people as opposed to just representing or a representation of whatever administration is currently in power that you're against. Something to keep in mind. So a lot of them maybe have some productive conversations with people if you happen to find yourself in such a situation. Let's see here, really quickly, a few other things I wanted to remind you of. The Bible Conference, I am getting ready for that. I've been prepping these past few weeks. That is, once again, the 2026 Spring Bible Conference, addressing doctrinal issues that churches avoid at Blue Baptist Church, March 27th through the 29th. I hope that you can be there. The sessions, session number 1 will be Friday night, the big Bible problem. I hope you bring an appetite as well, not just for the word, but for some food. We're going to feed you there. And then sessions 2 through 5, the contradictory kingdom, when the church actually began. Session 4, reinterpreting Jesus' teachings, or Jesus' teachings. And session 5, Paul's hijacking of the New Testament. Those will all be on Saturday. Saturday will be a very, very big, busy day. I hope you're ready for the long haul there. It will be an endurance. And then session number 6, the convoluted new covenant. And then finally, this is all going to be on Sunday, and we will wrap it up, session number 7, neglecting the necessities. Neglecting the necessities. And so, very excited for that. I hope that you will be able to join us. If you can't join us in person, we certainly will be going live online as well, and you'll be able to watch that, and it'll be fun. So with that, that's really all I have for you today, just reflecting on all these matters. We'll see how all this plays out. It's a difficult thing when you find yourself really looking at both sides of a conflict and saying there's almost nothing I agree with about the left's arguments, largely. But there's a few things I don't agree with on the right, or at least when I say the right, the current administration's approach right now. You've got to recalibrate. And I will say one thing about Trump is he can recalibrate. I think he's capable of it. I think he'll listen if you make enough noise. So we need to be discontent. We need to support, get behind politicians who do speak out about it. I hope that some that have the courage to do so will speak out on it. I hope that some political commentators will address that issue. Looking at you, Daily Wire, you need to handle this properly, and you need to handle it really closely to how I did, I think, because I think that there's some important things being overlooked by many. So with that, I don't have anything else for you today. Tomorrow, like I said, we should be going live. We'll probably have more follow-up on this. Probably have some other theological stuff. If there's anything you want me to talk about, please, by all means, send it to me so I can talk about it if it's something I feel like I can offer to you. In the meantime, I will be getting ready for the Bible conference. I'll be getting ready for Abraham. If you'd like to support our ministry, markbazeministries.org. It means a lot. This is what I do. I don't have another job. All right, I'm a pastor. I have the ministry. I teach the Word. I do offer some training. If you want to come do some training with me, that would be fine too. So thank you all so much for coming to Shields and Arrows today. We will see all of you later.